Welcome to the Product Design Podcast. I'm your host, Seth Coelen, founder of UX Cabin, where we create world-class web and mobile apps. I'm excited to bring you a behind-the-scenes look into the lives of some of the most interesting and talented people in product design. We'll get strategic advice on how they got to where they are today and things they wish they would have known earlier in their career. Hey, what's up, everybody? Today we have a really exciting show because we have Adam Sadowski coming on to talk with us. He is the design director here at UX Cabin. So this is going to be a fun little employee spotlight, but we're going to run it the same as a normal interview. So yeah, Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and where you live?
Sure. Yeah. First off, thanks so much for having me on. Really excited about this. I joined UX Cabin 3 months ago, approximately. Really hit it off with Seth on a number of things, our approach to design, leadership, as well as just a match between my experience and skills and what Seth was looking for. So yeah, super happy and excited to be here. I'm currently living out of Barcelona, Spain. I'm originally from the States, lived in New York for about 15 years and also spent about 10 or 11 years in Colorado. So I've definitely moved around a bit and had some balance between city life, country life, mountains, and whatnot. And I've been designing for about 12-ish years. I got really lucky. It happened completely by accident, really through an internship while I was still in high school. Had no idea that software was being designed by so many people and so much thought and effort was being put into the process behind the products I was using. So yeah.
I think one thing is always interesting is people's origin stories. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about like how you got into designing software through that internship?
Sure. So yeah, I had no idea. I had no aspirations to become a designer. But growing up, I was really into video games. I loved computers. When I stumbled onto the web, I instantly was obsessed with it and all the possibilities that it offered. And so I was really interested in software without really even realizing it. And so when I moved back to New York, I was just looking for a job, wanting to make some cash while I was still going to school. And my mom had, like, through her client network or whatever, she knew someone who knew somebody who had a small company in New York. And so I really just sent off like a cold email, seeing if they had any available work, any internship, any opportunities. And they did for like a project coordinator role. So I went there, I interviewed. I ended up working with that team for a long time, and my resume and initial interview kind of became the stuff of legend because it was so hilariously bad. I was like not selling myself. I was telling them I wanted to become a paramedic. Like I was going somewhere completely different in my life. My resume was an absolute joke. Like it had just a bullet point list of like working at an ice rink, adventure park for 3 months, just like ridiculous stuff. But I hit it off with that PM who ended up hiring me. And yeah, the rest is history. It was like originally supposed to be more like a PM role, but really quickly, because of all of my exposure to software and like cracking apps and video games, I was really handy with a computer and really understood technology. And what that company specialized in was creating educational activities for physicians within the medical community so that they could renew their credits for certification. And so I started just doing a lot of information architecture, user flows, sitemaps, and wireframes for those interactive activities, which at that point were still being built in Flash.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's
this was
incredible.
Like 2008, 2009, something like that. So yeah, I felt so lucky because I immediately found my calling. It was a job that was so cross-disciplinary, required a lot of collaboration, deep thinking. It's never boring. There's always something to do and a different angle to approach something by. So
Yeah.
that's how I got started.
Now, was anyone in there kind of like a senior designer person, or were you kind of like trailblazing on these things and like thinking like, oh, this would be cool if we did this, or if we map this out, or like how did the kind of the hierarchy work there?
Sure. Yeah, there were some visual designers at the org, but yeah, so when I had joined, I think this was probably a company of around 25 people, give or take. My working relationship was mostly with this PM, and there were a couple of other interns who were doing something similar, doing project coordination work and also assisting with information architecture. And so, no, there wasn't like any official design leadership, but the company really value design. Like Apple was always like a prized direction and example to always align ourselves to. And the PM also had an eye for design and a passion for it. And he very much understood that it was an important part of a product. A lot of it was figuring it out on my own
Yep.
eventually, which was both, both good and bad. But yeah, it was a pretty scrappy team in the early days.
Very cool. Very cool. And how long did you work there, and what was your next gig after that?
Yeah, so I probably worked there for a little over a year, probably a year and a half, just working after school and during summer and any extended breaks. And then I ended up taking a gap year once I graduated high school. And then I ended up getting an opportunity at a pretty up and coming agency at the time called Code and Theory in New York as well. And so I joined there as a junior UX designer. And what was really cool was that the team at Simon Media, this was the company that I had initially started at, were really supportive and understood that this was like a vital part of my growth and development as a designer. And they were right. It was such a great opportunity because then I actually joined a proper UX department, was surrounded by probably, I think, 8 or 9 other designers at that time. And the team was rapidly growing. So I got a lot of exposure to mid-level and senior level designers, and also just different ways of working because, UX means something different depending on if you're working at a startup, at an agency, different approaches to those processes as well. So yeah, it was absolutely amazing to finally have like a senior designer as a mentor and being able to like go to design reviews, learn from other designers, be exposed to different types of projects. So yeah, I did that for about 9 months. And then I actually ended up leaving because I was really, really young. I was 19 and I was surrounded by people who were like at least in their mid 20s, usually in their 30s.
Yeah,
And I kind of had a nice wake up call where it's like, I think I'm growing up a little too fast.
sure.
I have my whole life to be working and continuing down this path. So I took a step back and actually applied to back to school and ended up going to college.
Nice. Nice. So, did your degree in college or your time there correlate to UX or anything like that?
Indirectly, it was a global studies degree. It was actually a really amazing program and really, really small and kind of off the beaten path. I only knew about it from a college counselor during my high school days. And so, yeah, it was a global studies degree. You basically spent the majority of your undergrad abroad, studying in different countries in different programs that were like global studies, environmentalism, indigenous studies, language studies. Sometimes it was pretty country specific.
Wow.
But what it did was it made me a much better writer and researcher because it was very writing intensive. And there was a lot of anthropological and ethnographic based skills and studies and courses that we were participating in. And so, yeah, it definitely made me a much better writer and researcher and just made me a much more evolved human being. I mean, traveling and,
Sure.
and learning about other cultures and also deconstructing your own is so important to becoming a more informed individual, which in turn makes you a better designer.
That's really cool. That is
Yeah.
that is a unique path for sure. So,
Mm.
did you continue doing UX throughout your college career?
Yeah. Yeah. So then I was going back to that original company, Simon Media, that was doing in the enterprise space. I was contracting with them basically any chance I got through winter breaks or summer breaks.
Very cool. That's awesome. So, yeah, I think, just kind of in your origin story, talking about how you kind of got started and how you got linked up with the original internship really just shows the importance of just personal networks and introductions, knowing people who have connections and like being able to tap into those or take advantage of those. It's a lot better usually than just blind applying. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but if you had applied to that internship with your, resume and experience without having like a personal connection, maybe that would have gone differently. I don't know, maybe it wouldn't have, but
Sure.
people always think they don't know anyone. But if you consider like what is it, the 7 degrees of separation where you're like connected to
Sure.
everyone in the world, like someone knows someone that can introduce you or help you out or get you somewhere along the way. But yeah,
No, absolutely. And I think also The other lesson there is that there's multiple ways to break into design. Like I had no idea I was applying. It was like a project coordinator role. But then because of the rapport I developed and my skill set actually, and also the need, these like conditions allowed for like a lateral move for a change that I wasn't necessarily anticipating or expecting. And so, I think you have to be strategic. If you're trying to break into design, it pays to be really strategic about recognizing, okay, what are you good at? What are you passionate about? What do you have connections in? And how can you just break into a company? Really, that's the main thing. If there's any sort of industry or environment that you're looking to work in, whether it's agencies, startups, whatever it might be, your foot in the door might not be a design role. Maybe it's like
Yep.
being something with marketing or if engineering, if you've got any sort of chops to write code, PM, just get in the door and start to develop your skills, start to build trust and earn the trust with your team and see how you can wiggle laterally across, what you're passionate about, what you really want to end up doing.
Yeah, I think it's really funny in tech because I think that's an awesome way to kind of get to a different job that maybe you want to. Because I think in a lot of cases, people are like, don't do anything outside your job description because you're not being paid for it. And I think that's kind of like maybe like manual labor or like manufacturing thinking where it's like, yeah, like don't kill yourself, right? But it's like
Yeah.
in tech, it's almost like if you see something you want to do and you think you're good at it, like why not, you know, take a little bit of that off of someone else's plate to show what you can do or to like learn more about it to see if like, hey, this could be something interesting for me. So I think if you are in a job and you're thinking about switching roles, maybe there's an opportunity to kind of get your feet wet before fully committing or even fully switching to another job and testing that out a little bit on a very low risk environment.
Absolutely. And chances are, especially within tech, there's going to be some crossover. Knowing your way around a marketing team or marketing strategy, sales process, even customer success, any sort of management, all of that filters back into design as well. So it's a lot more interconnected than I think maybe people initially think. And so that's why it really pays to, find people that are doing the job that you want to be doing, see if you can develop relationships with them, learn about it, exactly what that actual job looks like on a day-to-day basis, and be strategic about how to get yourself as close as possible with the means and the available resources and opportunities you have at that moment. That
Yeah.
and keep in mind that that can change in 6 months, that can change in 12 months. So, it takes some strategy, it takes some patience, takes some luck, and it definitely takes a lot of hard work, especially in the beginning.
Yeah. So like looking back over your career and seeing that you had a number of like decision points of like, do I go to school or do I continue with this? Or do I change jobs? Or do I, all these different decisions. Do you look back and do you have any regrets or anything you wish you would have done differently?
Yeah, not really, because I felt like I was making, for the most part, I was making the best decision I could with what I had.
Yeah.
Like going through school for like, I mean, one of the things in my career was that I've worked with a very similar team and in the similar product space for a long time, close to a decade, both full-time and part-time. So, I mean, part of me would have loved to have had more exposure and worked at different companies or maybe on different types of products. But at the same time, it's like just with my circumstances, what I had available to me was also great. So,
Yeah.
I always had a
Can't
company
complain.
to fall back on. Exactly. I always had a company to fall back on to do work with when I had a free moment, when I had 2 months off, when I had 6 weeks off. And so, like maybe I wouldn't have had other opportunities to break into another company. So yeah, not really. I think I've done a pretty good job of regularly reflecting on where I'm at, what I've done, where am I trying to go, and figuring out how to make a change if I'm unhappy for whatever reason.
Sure. Sure. Thinking about the different environments that you've been in, the different teams, the different sizes, are there any like specific highs or lows that you look back on and say like this was a really unique, good experience, or this was rough, really got burnt out, or anything like that?
Sure. Yeah. At that previous company, and this company no longer exists, so I think it's fine to say some of the work environment was a bit challenging because it was very stakeholder driven. And so a lot of autonomy was taken away from the teams directly involved with building the product. And also there were a lot of like external promises and commitments being made to users of our platform, along with very, very aggressive timelines. So
Right.
it was just at some points you just felt a little doomed from the start,
Yes.
but it also, it also makes you a better designer, makes you a bit more battle hardened. You can deal with ambiguity, you can deal with pressure, you can surprise yourself with what you can, with what you can create and what you can deliver. And it also, I think, equally importantly, gives you firsthand experience of how not to do things.
Yeah.
And that also, if you ever start your own thing or once you start looking for a new team to join, you start to recognize red flags much faster. And you also know what sort of questions you should be asking. So it's also very handy for then navigating down your own future career path.
Yeah, that's super good. I had a number of, different experiences across agencies, corporations, even freelance work. So I've gotten a taste of a lot of different things. And it's super beneficial to be part of non-optimal processes. In the moment, you might not think it,
Which
but
is
it's
like
like,
every company also. Like
yeah,
there
yeah,
is no
right.
perfect company.
Exactly. Exactly. And I've been a part of companies who get the team thing right really well, but they don't nail the business side of things. And been a part of
Sure.
teams who are really, really good at the business side, but the team is like, eh. And so taking little bits of pieces of who does it right, who does it wrong, and kind of, trying to basically formulate UX Cabin in the best way possible has been really fun and exciting. And I wouldn't have been able to do that without, you know, going through like a dozen or 2 dozen poorly run projects across,
Yeah.
the years. And even still, like, we're having talks of on, retros on like, what could we have done better? And there's always room for improvement. But like, yeah, I think the one takeaway you could have if you're in a really like stressful company or project is like, if nothing else, you're learning how not to do something. You're learning how to protect yourself or your team for the next project. What can you throw up as a red flag or something a bridge you don't want to cross the next time something like this comes along?
Absolutely. And yeah, it's difficult too, because you also need to figure, yeah, you need to recognize no team, no company, no platform, no product is perfect. And so I think it helps to have like a check-in with yourself to identify like what's really important to you and what sort of lines are you not going to allow to be crossed.
Right.
Because yeah, there's just certain things that you're probably going to have to deal with whatever organization you join. And then, from there, you can start to think like, okay, what's within my control? What's within my means? What's outside of my control? What can I potentially impact and influence and change? And what can't I? And allow that to help, orient yourself within your own journey and also recognize, is there opportunity to stick it out and maybe make a change and like go
Yep.
over a hump? Is this a temporary symptom? Is the company just growing really, really quickly, for example? And of course, there's growing pains, like things are going to be chaotic. Or is there just really, really toxic leadership or toxic company culture, which is like way more difficult to change for example. And so
Right.
at that point, you might start thinking, okay, like I've realized this is how this certain aspect is. It's really important to me. It's one of my non-negotiables. And I think it might be time to start thinking of the next phase.
Yeah. Yeah. I think in most of the places I've been where it's like not the greatest, run thing, it's like really good people managing a project poorly. And
Yeah.
I think one strategy, if you're in a poorly run project where it's like there's way too much to do and not enough time, I think that can be a really good exercise in like prioritization and kind of forcing the product owner or the PM's hands to help make the prioritization. So basically saying, I can either do this or that. There's just all of this is not going to get done. I think this is the best way, the most valuable thing we can do. You tell me if I'm wrong. versus just trying to get everything done and not getting anything done by the deadline.
Definitely, it does create opportunities for you to rise to an occasion and also develop skills that you also might not be getting paid for. You might be stepping up to a level. Basically, you might be start to do someone else's job, which I think is common as well. You start picking up slack because people aren't pulling their weight. And so obviously you don't want to do that to the point where it's negatively impacting your personal life.
Right.
But it can also be great in being able to develop new skills and also demonstrate your value within a team and an organization. There's actually something recently that probably in the last year and a half or so that I've adopted into my own life, and I've also been introducing it to the team at UX Cabin actually, and that's to set up a hype doc. And so basically what that is, it's your own personal record and your own personal timeline of all the things and achievements that you've been doing and being recognized for within whatever team that you're working within. And you can also use it to chart a path forward. So you can also outline, what are the next things, goals or things that you want to accomplish over the next 3 to 6 months. And so if you actually start to record all of these accomplishments or how you're impacting the team or the product or gaining recognition from whoever at the org, it also gives you awesome data to then either approach a senior leader at the company and ask for a promotion or ask for a raise, or say, hey, look, I'm doing these 3 to 5 things that are outside of my current role. This is the feedback, this is the impact. And it also really helps when you're interviewing for new positions too. So I think that's also something really worth looking into, is not just like, design wise, being really good at creating case studies and keeping those up to date, which is like the bane of all of our existence, but also recording the positive impact that you're having within your team to help you also get further along.
Yeah, that's great. That's great advice. Just having like either an email thread with yourself or like a document where you can throw snapshots or sentiments in.
Exactly. Yeah, it can be as simple and scrappy as you need it to be, as you want it to be, because it's so easy to forget. Like even when you're especially in a startup environment, or I mean even agency environment, you're moving at such a breakneck pace that even thinking about what we did 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, you're like, what did I do? So
Yeah.
having some sort of record of it is super helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing that I wanted to bring up, I don't think we talked about it before, but wanted to also highlight just kind of how you uh, got connected with us and how you came on to UX Cabin. Because I think there's, at least from my perspective, a really interesting approach that you took that not really anyone else took that was applying for the job. But yeah, maybe you can give us a really high level overview of kind of what drew you to UX Cabin and how we, started having the initial conversation.
Yeah, sure. So my previous role was at a startup called Event Cadence. And it was a startup. It was a great opportunity because I was able to be there from the very beginning. That PM that had hired me at my very first internship was actually the CEO, Michael Buckley. And we had the opportunity to take a product that was at our previous company that the company didn't want to focus on, and that we found was getting some success and traction, and spin it into a separate startup, completely disconnected from the previous company. And that was for event management and event experiences. And so I was the founding designer for that role, and really got to be a part of that startup journey where you're just a few people in the beginning. And, I think at our height, at that height, it was like 40 or so people all around the world. So that was just an unbelievably amazing experience to be a part of that process and a part of that growth and all of the highs and lows within that. And then, and so, at some point I kind of wanted to start doing other things. I had been at that company for about 5.5 years, working with the same team or similar people for even longer. And so I was starting to think about my next step in my career for the next few years, but also what do I want to be doing in 10 years, 15 years? And so one of my passions and one of my callings is actually working with lots of entrepreneurs and across a variety of projects. I really like being able to jump into different industries, use cases, customers, and figure out what's unique about it and how we can make something work. And through my job search, I saw UX Cabin and immediately felt a connection with the type of vibe of people and type of company that I'm looking to work for. what was really great about Cadence, which is really similar to UX Cabin, is it's a really great, fun vibe. A lot of people are friends on the team. It's not too big. It's not some like big megacorp where you don't really know anyone's name or, like, yeah, we're basically, yeah, you don't really know who you're working with. And so the opportunity to work on a small team, mostly designers across a variety of projects. I really love that you being the CEO, you're a former designer. I mean, you still are a designer, but that's just amazing because it already means that like, you understand the value of design, you understand how to design. There's not going to be like battles or pushback or really any tension in that regard. There were so many positive
Yeah.
like attributes that were drawing me to the role.
So the main thing I wanted to point out is just Adam's approach in this. So he applied, and then he was like one of 80, maybe two of 80 people that also submitted the optional video introduction. And not only did he do this, but he also reached out to me on LinkedIn and just was like, "Hey, just so you know, I applied for this, and I appreciate like the consideration," or something along those lines. And so like that did, a number of things. Number one, like he stood out immediately because he kind of got into my inbox, right? And he's like, "Hey, calling attention to this. I want you to see this." And then he also like put together a really nice video, even if he put something together and he stumbled over his words or whatever, it's still like far and above what anyone else did at that point. So it's like, obviously Adam and I had to have talks, and many times that we had to kind of hash things out, talk through the interview process. But like, if you want to get noticed, like that is a really, really easy, good way to get noticed and to get your name to the top of the list. So, wanted to, yeah, and it's those types of things are free. They take a little bit of effort, right? But like, I think there's definitely some takeaways there that people can take and use for their strategy as they're applying for jobs.
I can't believe only two people submitted a video. That's
I think there might have been like three, but one of them was like a minute long, and it was like, almost worse than not
not doing it.
than not doing it. But as far as like qualified candidates, yeah, I think there's like two.
Man, that video, I still remember that took me like 45 minutes to record also. And I feel even dumber now because I've used Loom. I've used Loom for ages and I never, I never knew there was a pause feature. So like any time that I messed up, I just canned the whole video. I know it ended up being like 6 or 7 minutes where like, you're trying not to stumble and like you're just trying to make sense, like present yourself in a good way. So yeah, I had to record that video like 20 times, I think. So yeah, I'm glad it worked.
From the video, you just get to see so much more about a person than just the link to their website or their resume. Because like, just seeing Adam, you can see like he has a calm demeanor. Like, yeah, this would probably work good in like leadership. This would be,
Sure.
be, like calm and reassuring. And there's like, it's basically like looking at a black and white picture, being the resume, to seeing like an HD, feature length movie, when someone can provide a little bit more context or video to their application. So yeah, I'm definitely
Definitely.
glad our paths crossed, and Adam has really been elevating our design team and helping lead projects. So it's been a great fit from my perspective.
Thanks, Ben. No, I feel the same way. We hit it off very quickly in the beginning, like I was mentioning it in the intro. So that was also a really positive signal for me when things feel really natural, almost like suspiciously natural. We were like, wait, a minute, like this is going really well. But I wanted to just throw out that one little tip because it was something that I was using throughout my job search. So if any sort of role, like the job search and process is really overwhelming. I mean, even making a video, even answering questions, like it obviously takes a lot of time. And so I think it pays to be a little selective, prioritize, make a list of all these roles that you're interested in, start finding out which ones you really want, like which ones would really, really be awesome, and which ones, you'd be interested in, it could be a potential fit. Apply for the first ones, for the lower priority ones first, because I think it gives you some practice for answering questions, for even hopping on some calls and talking about yourself, especially if you're a little rusty like I was. I hadn't interviewed in like a decade. So I had some early conversations where it was like, so tell me about yourself. And I did like the classic, but I was like, when I was 6 years old, like I gave a life story, when it's like, keep it like high level, give someone a brief overview of like what you've done, what you value, and like, what you're looking for. So, just focus on getting lots of interviews, focus on like the lower priority companies first, maybe. And then for the ones that you're really interested in, see if you can figure out who the hiring manager is, who the design director is, who the CEO is. It depends on the scale of the company. Don't emailing the CEO of a 10,000 person company probably isn't the right strategy. But yeah, either through email or Twitter or LinkedIn. And two really good questions that can kind of get your foot in the door and give you some insight. One, could you please describe your hiring process? That's going to be really great because it gives you an idea of what exactly that's going to look like. Is it 2 meetings? Is it 8? Is there a design challenge? Is there a homework thing? It gives you more information to figure out like, okay, like I'm not doing 8 interviews unless it's like the greatest company ever.
Right.
Is there a take-home challenge that immediately gives you a question, like, okay, like, is that paid? Am I being compensated? How much time is that going to be? You're basically qualifying and disqualifying companies the same as they're going to be doing to you. And the second one is, what are the ideal qualities that you're looking for in a candidate? Because that then immediately gives you an idea of how you can shape your presentation, your resume, your career, your story, really, to really be in line with what it is that they're looking for. So
Yeah.
it gives you information. And then it's also pretty impressive on the other end, because you're like, okay, wow, there's like this person is trying to learn about the role. They care about it. They're doing some research.
Yep.
This isn't just some like big email blast that they're doing across, 300 companies.
Yeah. The other thing that I can't speak for anyone else, but I can speak for myself, is that like when you're applying to job posts, I think there's something to be said for being one of the earlier applicants, just because personally, when I put up a job posting, I'm very interested. Like I want to get going with it. I want to see how it's going and how it's trending. And so I pay very, very close attention to the first handful. And so if you're looking at job boards and you see something that's like posted 21 days ago, there's probably a good chance that that has been filled, or at least the folks at the company aren't paying as super close attention to day 21 as they are, week 1. So there's probably an exercise in prioritization for that as well, just because you kind of want to get your name to the front of the list. And again, not sure how other companies do it, but that's just by nature how I kind of observe things
Yeah,
as
absolutely.
things come into play.
I think the other thing I would recommend too, I mean, resumes for designers, maybe aren't as important as a portfolio, but I still think it's a great opportunity to showcase your writing and obviously your history. So it's important. And get that thing professionally edited, people. There's like nothing that can disqualify you faster than a resume that like you're like with spelling mistakes, doesn't have like a
Yeah.
consistent tone or tense within it. I even had some help too. I mean, my partner's an editor, but also Adam Karpiak. He's like a recruiter on LinkedIn. I had seen that he had posted he regularly posts slots in his calendar for reviewing resumes. I mean, it's paid, it's a
Ooh,
paid gig,
that's interesting.
but I had used his service too, just to make sure that everything is going to be tip top, which is super important, especially if you're going to be applying towards more senior roles, because like the smallest thing, you don't want the smallest thing to disqualify you before you have an
Yeah.
opportunity to speak to somebody.
The ROI on that must be crazy because what, a few $100 to get something
Exactly.
checked that could, set you up really nice for your next career step. That's a really good tip.
Definitely.
So, yeah, maybe we can kind of get into a little bit of, managing teams. You've been managing teams, people for a while now, and all different folks from all over the world. And would love to dive into maybe some of your top do's and don'ts for managing teams for our listeners.
Yeah, sure. I think at the core of leading any sort of team is relationships. And that's something that one takes a lot of it takes a lot of time and effort to build. And it's something that I think I've seen and experienced, even noticed myself doing it at times where it can fall by the wayside and more like execution type work can take priority because that has like a clear, a clear outcome, or there's like a customer, there's pressure. But investing in your team is the absolute most important thing that a leader needs to be doing on a consistent basis. It's not something that you might quantifiable ROI, or however you want to phrase it, might not be immediately visible or maybe even ever visible. It's difficult to draw those lines or conclusions, but it's the most important thing you can be doing, because if the team sees that you have their best interest at heart and that you're invested in their growth and their development and how they're feeling and how they're doing, and really, really just caring, then everyone's going to be so much more engaged. People are going to be producing so much better work. They're going to be so much happier, and you're going to have so much more impact in their entire career trajectory. I mean, there's a great saying that it's like, you don't quit your job, you quit your manager. It's usually the number one thing. It's like you feel like you're stagnating, you feel like you're not going anywhere, or you feel like you have no ownership. And so you start looking for other options.
Yeah.
There was a recent thing on Twitter going around. It's been first, it started as quiet quitting, where people were
Yeah.
talking about like the signs of like, someone who's slow, like quiet quitting being where they haven't outright quit, but they're not engaged, they're not joining meetings, or, they're not performing maybe as they were previously. But what I really liked is, I don't remember who did it, but someone kind of flipped that and was like, the more important thing that we should be talking about is quiet firing, where managers in a company actually aren't setting people up for success. Or maybe they were initially
Ooh.
during the onboarding process, and that starts to
Yeah.
phase. Let's not put the responsibility on the employee to like be giving 110%. Like that starts at the top and should trickle down in terms of
Yeah.
like motivation, clarity, and support.
Totally. And I think what you're describing, I think over the long arc, it's hard to see, or the short term, it's hard to see ROI of like I'm meeting with this person a lot. Things seem just to be going fine and good. But I also like I've had times where I met with people on the team where, for whatever reason, they're feeling anxious or worried about something, and just kind of having that touch point to either reassure them or direct them or like kind of point them in the right direction. I've almost seen like an immediate impact in a lot of cases where it's like, they kind of needed to talk to someone and say like, "Hey, am I crazy? Am I doing okay?" Like just level set with them. And
Yeah, a little
I
bit of
think,
feedback or
yeah,
reassurance even.
yeah, reassurance, just having that level of like, I need to talk to someone and I need to like just either say my piece and I'll feel a lot better, or I need to, have feedback on it, on if I did something good or bad in the situation. And by and large, I think you know, that type of culture creates a calm team that when you're calm, you're able to execute well. And I think, yeah, everything you said is totally on point with the dues of management. Any examples of really bad experiences with management that you've either witnessed or learned along the way?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, about management. I mean, I think one of the most harmful things that anyone in any sort of leadership position can do is basically make their stress the team's stress. I think one of your many roles as a leader is to be a shield and be very careful and precious with people's time and effort. And so that's like one of the biggest things people can feel like if you're really stressed, if you're under a lot of pressure, that can immediately translate to the rest of the team, and it starts
Yeah.
making everyone else stressed, anxious, and it just creates an environment that is difficult to create in. And you definitely aren't excited to be a part of a team where you're working for like a stress ball.
It's really funny that you mentioned that because I didn't even think of this like until just now. But in my first job, our design team manager, he'd always come in like a little bit later than me, and like totally nice, fine guy. But just like the way he would walk into the building was like hurried and stressed. And like I don't know if it was just me, but it felt like the whole like environment changed just when he like hurriedly like walked in. Didn't even like particularly say anything like mean or whatever. It was just like you just felt it like change just by someone's like walking in. I was like, man, now I just feel stressed for no reason at all.
Yeah. And you feel it immediately. And someone, like you said, they don't even have to say anything. It's like an aura, a body language, whatever
Right.
level you want it, you feel it at, like it's there. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge one. You have to have emotional intelligence and temperament to figure out exactly how to basically shield the people that you're working with from a lot of the BS that you're going to have to experience and a lot of the stress and pressure that you're under. So yeah, that would be one. I guess, even for myself, I think something that, I've had to learn too and put effort towards is something that I was talking about earlier, which is like building those relationships consistently, because I'm also very known for, like, when I'm in work mode, I'm in work mode and I'm like very much in the zone and like nothing else exists. But at the same time, I don't want to seem like unapproachable
Yep.
or anything like that, because that's not the case at all. I'm gladly available to jump in and work through anything that someone might be experiencing. So what's helped me is just having those consistent, dedicated spaces for those things. I think that's why, like, regular one-on-ones are so important. They don't really have to all be work related. It can also just be time
Totally.
for you to be getting to know each other, chatting about stuff. I chat about music and TV shows and really just connecting on a personal level outside of just design or work related things.
And I also think like in that, yeah, I think in a lot of cases, if someone is not like quote unquote like performing well or having like a bad work week or something, usually there's something like influencing that, whether they have something personal going on or like a health thing or just like something in their life that's going on. And I think having those touch points, just those check-ins, or even not assuming that they're like trying to be lazy or whatever, and just, checking in with them on a more personal level will often show the more human side of work and bring out a way that you might be able to support that person rather than like scold them for not doing good at work, right? Like,
Yeah. Bad management 101.
right. Totally. So I think,
No,
yeah, just having those frequent connections where you're involved in that person's life to the degree that they let you be, and okay, like so and so's going through a rough week. They, whatever happened, so let's give them a pass on this or whatever.
exactly. It's like I firmly believe, and I think you do as well. It's like the people who work with us, like, their well-being is paramount. That's the most important thing. Like, there's always going to be work, there's always going to be customers, there's always going to be fires to put out,
Yep.
whatever. But it's like, from a day-to-day basis, it's like you have to put your people first. And I think part of leadership also is accepting total responsibility. It's like there is nothing that it ultimately doesn't roll up to being your responsibility. And so you, as a leader, have to be accountable for that and figure out how to unblock, how to give someone a break, how to solve issues. Like, everything is on you. There's no like, oh, this team failed to deliver this, or this project turned, like, the design's crap. Like, no, it's on you. So you need to figure out what sort of relationships, mechanisms, workshops, whatever it might be, to make sure that you've got a pulse on things, and that you're also making sure that the right people are in the right role
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah. And I think when someone is given that space to, you know, just go through the normal rhythms of life, when you do have a pinch or when someone else, needs to step aside for a second, those people are going to be that much more willing to like put in the extra effort when they're in the good mind space to do so because they've been given, the flexibility and the freedom and the care when they needed it. So like rarely there have been times, but there have been times where it's like, oh crap, we need to like kind of need to work the weekend on this. And since it's very few and far between, and since, we try to like by and large take care of everyone's well-being, it's like, okay, this sucks, but I don't mind doing it because it's a one-time thing and I feel taken care of. So it's like, okay, we'll do it. We'll get it done, and we'll try not to let it be a thing of reoccurrence. But it's like those are the types of things that you're investing in people, you're caring for people, and then every once in a while when you need to do something like that, it's like not that huge of an ask.
Definitely. No, it's and like you said, that's where really the relationships and the trust and the support really come in. And and honestly, also for those situations too, it's like really important to figure out how did we get to this point
Yep,
where we have to do this. Of course, sometimes there's like just an event completely outside of your control that will cause it. So yeah, always reflecting on why we ended up in this situation and doing everything we can to prevent it. And I think also what goes a long ways in those situations is you as a leader also showing up. If you're asking
totally.
people, you're asking people to work the weekend, you should probably be in there too.
Yep.
You're like not like texted photos from the beach. That's a really good way to lose respect
Yeah.
from the people that you're working with.
Yes. So I know on this podcast, we've talked a lot about in previous episodes going from 0 to 1, but I think you have a lot of experience and insight into going from maybe like mid-level to senior and kind of some of the things that you need to do to bridge the gap in going from mid to senior. So maybe you can just broadly describe for us some of the differences between those level of roles.
Sure. And yeah, I mean, of course, it's going to depend on any team or company that you join because the expectations around what exactly it is that you're going to be doing will vary. So, I mean, like obviously, let's just make the assumption that, like, from a design standpoint, from a craft standpoint, your information architecture, your visual design, your ability to prototype, all of that has to be, at a much more advanced level and can
Yep.
also be perhaps specialized in one of those domains within the design craft. Maybe it's more within UX or information architecture, visual design, motion,
Yep.
you know, whatever that might be. But I think the key differences are actually really correlate with what we've been talking about for leadership and management positions. It becomes so much more about collaboration and moving a team forward towards a desired outcome or goal. And so you need to start possess or start developing a lot of those skills, like really clear and consistent communication, practicing on your storytelling and public speaking. Since you're going to be leading a lot more presentations, you're going to be needing to motivate and influence and sometimes even convince stakeholders or even your team to go down a certain direction. I think organization is so key and just so helpful. Keeping track of everything just makes you so much more indispensable and useful within a team and really necessary for taking a project from 0 to 1, especially during the later stages where things start to become a lot more scattered. There's a lot more finessing, a lot more
Yep.
attention to detail that's needed. So really being able to keep track of what a project is, what it needs, and how to get there is critical. I think in terms of like more within the design process, being able to critique your own designs before
Yep.
it's even gotten to a team review. So being able to take a step back, recognize something's not working, spin up a few different directions, being able to anticipate that, like, I've actually the last 2 hours is a waste because or not a waste. I've gone down the wrong path. I actually need to take like 3 steps back and go a
Right.
completely different direction. So there's a lot more responsibility and a lot more accountability for being able to get it right faster.
Yeah. I think also in like the senior level is kind of in the sense of like the Michael Jordan effect, where obviously Michael Jordan is amazing, untouchable, but he also like elevates the team around him. So, and if you are a senior or like a leadership position in a design company or a company, it's like your influence on the team should elevate the juniors to mid, the mid to senior by your advice, your coaching, your influence, because you can help them understand like priority. You can help them point them in the right direction so they're not spinning their wheels. Like I worked with a lot of talented designers, and it's kind of like some people you need to just point in the right direction and like push them off, right? Because like it's like, yeah, your flying looks great, but you're flying in the wrong direction. Like let's
Yeah.
change you and like point you there. And so I think a huge thing for leadership or senior positions is just that elevation of like, okay, if we have this person on there, we know that they're going to elevate the three mid people around them. So it's almost like we have four senior people executing on this, which is like
Right.
amazing.
Absolutely. No, and I think you brought up a really important point around like the mentorship aspect. I think those expectations greatly increase where you're starting to not like tell the people that you're working with what to do, but guide them towards those paths and towards those solutions, which also takes some practice and it also takes some patience, especially in the situations where you don't have time. It's easy to like, if you like 3 weeks to work on something, it's easy to like guide someone and like ask probing questions and try to eliminate a path forward without explicitly saying it. But if you've got like a delivery that's like due in 2 days, that becomes a lot more difficult. But it's still so important for that own person's journey. So it takes some trial and error, and you don't get it right 100% of the time. But practicing how to guide someone within tight time frames or stressful situations is really where like the magic happens.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. We're thinking about like internally all of these like designer level skill sets, right? We've kind of been tooling around with that internally, but like outside of just the core skills of design, there's a lot of other things that go into making someone a good designer that don't really have anything to do with like your tool or your, school of thought or your, background in design. So, maybe we can kind of just close this episode off with, some core skill sets that lend themselves to being helpful skills and qualities for designers that aren't actually like design skills.
Sure. I mean, I think, yeah, like in no particular order. I mean, and I think also this leads into like mid to senior leveling is like proactivity. I think being proactive is super important. Not waiting around to be told what to do, but being able to figure out what needs to get done
Yeah.
and arriving with ideas and solutions, in hand. I think, yeah, I mentioned organization. I think that's so key.
Yep.
Honing in on your own instincts as well and trusting your gut and your intuition just as much as you trust the word of a customer or a piece of data on a dashboard or report. I think learning how to ask questions and ask the right questions and form those questions is really at the center of what we're doing that guides so much of our decision making and the directions that we head down.
Yeah, and I
I
also
think,
think there's a lot of times I think we can ask questions that as designers that almost are more helpful if the recipient knows why we're asking that. So I'm
that's a
sure
great point.
we've all got on calls like I don't know, I was scheduling like an appliance thing, right? And before they asked me anything about like the appliance, they're like, what's your phone number? What's your email? What's your address? I was like, but you don't even know if you can help me. Like, tell me why you need this first. So it's like, I think a lot of the questions, especially in product, can almost come across like aggressive and
Yeah.
like, I don't, why are you asking this? So I think, you know,
Or even if
having
you're
that,
asking a customer, it's like, you might be asking, it's like, why are you asking me? It's like,
right,
well, because it sets the context and actually it empowers the person you're asking to actually give you an answer that is going to be useful to you.
right.
Because if the answer is more open-ended, they might answer it in a slightly different way and not give you exactly what you need. Whereas if you're really upfront with that, like, hey, what's this? The reason I want to know this is because it relates to X, Y, and Z.
Yep.
They can answer your question much more effectively.
Yep.
So that's such a crucial point.
Just having that senior level context knowledge, or even like when you're on an app and it's like, show me, like, allow location. The good apps are like, hey, allowing location will help you to be able to do this thing that you want to do. It's like, okay, cool. You're kind of like priming the user on why it's important that you're asking for this or, going about this.
You're giving context, and that also translates into a team environment, even with, I mean, even in one-on-ones, even in design reviews, being really clear about, for example, what sort of feedback you're looking for or what sort of feedback you're not looking for. Any sort of clarity and elevation to your communication is so important and such a crucial part of being a designer, because that's honestly most of our job. It's communicating with our team, communicating with stakeholders, with the customer, communicating through our designs. So if you work on that, it's going to make you that much better.
Totally.
That's
Totally.
why writing has like exploded over the last few years. It started with Medium and now like with Substack and tweet threads. It's like
Yeah.
writing is is mentioned now within the design community, maybe even more than coding.
Right.
And I
Should
fully
designers
support
write?
yeah, and I say yes. I don't think they have to code. I think you should understand some basic code, but I don't think it's necessary. But I think you absolutely should write. You should focus on writing because it's at the core of what you do, and it's at the core of our design process too. When we're even working off requirements, working off any sort of personas, any briefs, it's at the core.
Totally. Well, Adam, this has been an awesome time. Wanted to just give the floor to you one more time if you have any parting words, but we really appreciate the insight, the wisdom, and all of your contributions to the team for sure.
Oof, an inspiring message to all of humanity. And he crumbles.
Yeah.
How about this? I think one of the really important things to realize as soon as possible is that you have to take control of your own path and you have to be proactive and strategic about it. No one is going to come and just like hand you all these amazing opportunities on a silver platter. It takes a lot of intention. It takes a lot of effort and it takes some luck, but you're actually a lot more in control than you think you are. And so, speak to people, learn from the best, try things, experiment, but think about how to get to where you want to be and work yourself backwards because it is possible. And you could take someone even like my career or other kind of self-starters or, non-design background people that have been able to break in as examples to that.
That's awesome. Love it. Love it. Well, Adam,
Thanks so much.
thank you. And this has been great. And I think it's going to help a lot of people.
Cool. Yeah, I'll see you I think we have a meeting in like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Seth.
Thanks so much for hanging out with us today on the Product Design Podcast. If you enjoyed our conversation, be sure and go follow our guests. Let them know they did a great job and you learned a lot. More to come in the following weeks as we bring on new guests. Please hit that subscribe button so that you will get these podcasts and learn a ton about the product design community. Excited to see you next time. Thanks.